Hey everybody, it's review time and I'm back with another exclusive. Now, earlier on in the year, I first found out about a brand new firework for 2024 by Quantum Fireworks called Magnificent 7. It's actually a compound firework, and what struck me about it at the time was that it lasted 7 minutes. Wow, that's probably the longest running compound I've ever seen. So I did a little video on that earlier in the year, looking at the stock footage. I've now been given one of these to film and fire and see it with my own eyes, because if you saw that original video, and if you didn't, there's a link in the corner of the screen now, I was a little bit skeptical. I found the firework a little bit boring and I did have some concerns over its duration. So I've now got my hands on it. It's a compound fireworks. There's 4 individual fireworks in this. It's category F3, a main fuse and a reserve fuse. The first cake is 995.4 grams of net explosive content, as is the second cake and the third cake, and the fourth cake, the final cake, is 1,000 grams. So just shy of 4 kilograms of net explosive content in this compound firework. It's really heavy. It's meant to last 7 minutes. I want to fire it and see if it lasts that long, and also to see whether it's as boring as the original footage looked. So without further ado, let's fire this and see what it's like. So now that I've seen Magnificent 7 with my own eyes and have been able to film some landed footage of it, what did I think? Well, I think the most obvious thing to note is that it didn't last 7 minutes. The one I fired lasted just over 5.5 minutes. 5 minutes 38 seconds to be precise. That's a real shame, as the main selling point of this compound is its build duration of 7 minutes, which, if it achieved that, would make this one of the longest consumer compounds currently available. Don't get me wrong, a compound lasting over 5.5 minutes is still quite rare, but it's a shame that Magnificent 7 didn't last close to what I was expecting it would. But let's put the duration of it to one side for a minute and instead look at the effects within. Now, a category F3 compound has a legal maximum net explosive content of 4 kilograms. Magnificent 7 gets very close to that at 3,986.2 grams. That's an impressive figure, but to make an F3 compound last over 5.5 minutes, it does mean that the power and the powder of each shot is reduced, as that 4 kilogram overall limit cannot be breached. There wasn't really a lot of oomph with each lift, and indeed each break in the first 3 sections of the cake. The bursts were not particularly big or spherical, and the pace felt quite slow. Yes, there were some sections where several shots would fire in rapid succession, and that certainly helped to give it a little bit of variety to an otherwise pretty slow pace. To its credit though, there is a decent variety of colour in this firework. There's some sections of crackle as well, and some nice little strobe effects, including these lovely little red ones. I think these were my favourite effect actually in the whole of this compound. The final cake in this compound of 100 shots from 25mm tubes was actually pretty decent. It had a much better pace, far bigger bursts and far more power in each shot. Quite a marked contrast and noticeable improvement in fact to the shots from the earlier 3 cakes with 20mm tubes. So let's look at the price. Magnificent 7 from Quantum Fireworks has a recommended retail price of £400, but you can typically get this from retailers this year for around about £375. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a fan of this firework. Sadly, I think the design focus has been more on eking out its duration rather than on it having impactful effects and a wow factor. The last section, yeah, good. The first 3 sections, quite disappointing. I think really if Quantum had speeded up the pace of the first 3 cakes, they'd actually have a pretty decent compound here that would still have a good duration. As it stands though, for close to £400, I think people will be a little bit disappointed with the performance of this, and perhaps feel a little bit shortchanged if it only lasts 5.5 minutes instead of 7. Plus, I think there's a real risk that spectators are going to get a little bit bored during the first 3 quarters of this compound. That said, I've no doubt that this will sell well, particularly for New Year's Eve when people just want to light one fuse and have a display in a box that lasts over 5 minutes. But I would just refer back to the comments I made in my original video on Magnificent 7 when I first found out about it, and I think those comments there still stand. Yes, now that I've seen Magnificent 7 for myself, the effects are certainly a bit better than the original stock footage, but sadly the duration just isn't there, and this compound doesn't really have much of a wow factor for me. But what do you think? Why not let me know in the comments? Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this review, why not check out some more of my firework reviews?